Minutes of the January 4th, 2010 committee meeting. Anybody have any comments or
Motion to approve?
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. The next item this evening, and I think we'll all find it very interesting, you all got a report on the Lake Forest train station. I think, Bob, you want to kind of kick that topic off, and then we have quite a few people in the room here to kind of give us some background. So.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Committee of the Whole. This evening, it is my pleasure to invite the Historic Preservation Foundation, who back in 2019, Gail's going to kill me when I say that. As many of you know, the Preservation Foundation was involved with the train station many years ago, or 27, 30 years ago almost, I think, right? And now they're back because the station needs work. And as the council knows, this is something that we have been talking about for the last couple of years. We've applied for a couple of ITEP grants. Unfortunately, we've been unsuccessful in securing ITEP grants up to this point in time to help to that restoration project. But in 2009, the foundation did hire Harbo Architects to do a historic structure report. And what you have before you this evening is a copy of that report. And it is my pleasure to introduce Gail Hodges, who is here this evening to kick off the topic on behalf of the Preservation Foundation and to introduce the various other guests that are here this evening to walk us through the report. And then we can have a broader discussion about where do we go from here in terms of trying to maintain this historic facility in downtown Lake Forest. So, Gail? If you want to go over to the podium first, that way.
Thank you. Members of the City Council, City staff, ladies and gentlemen in the audience. It's hard to believe, but nearly 24 years ago in 1986, when I was president of the Preservation Foundation and co-chairman of the station renovation, the community celebrated the renovation of the historic downtown station in conjunction with the 125th anniversary of the founding of Lake Forest, and now very soon we'll be at the 150th anniversary of Lake Forest's founding. The nearly $1 million renovation was initiated by the Lake Forest Preservation Foundation and was a cooperative effort over 7 years between the foundation, the RTA, now Metra, the City of Lake Forest, and commercial tenants of the station. Private and business donations and hundreds of volunteer hours funded the most significant portion of the project. The station renovation was among the first of a long line of community contributions made by the Preservation Foundation to fulfill its goal of preserving the historic visual character of our community within the context and demands of life today. Since then, we have supported numerous other projects, including the renovation of the City Hall and the chamber in which we meet tonight. Before renovation, a state of disrepair characterized the structure and the site. Maintenance by railroad entities was essentially non-existent. We used to joke that on a typical day, a railroad employee got off the train with a bucket and mop, and he waited for the next train and hopped on when it came along. The renovation project stabilized and improved the structure and site. Maintenance was improved by the city assuming maintenance and management and funding these responsibilities with tenant income. Limited funds, however, precluded a true restoration project using the kinds of material that had served the station well for over 80 years, materials that had long-term durability. Now the durability of the 1980s renovation has run its life. the highly visible building that is a keystone of Market Square is in need of significant work. The foundation has directed its attention to this National Register listed property because it is highly visible to and well used by both residents and visitors. It is in fact one of the finest train stations in the Chicago region. The station has reached a critical milestone. A major tenant has vacated its space. The interior historic character has been greatly altered, and materials used there need to be of a quality to last 80 to 100 years, not just another 25. We really don't want to do this over again. Building codes have changed and require compliance. How these and other issues are addressed in the next few years will determine the future of the station. Will it be restored to a condition similar to its original appearance and character as one of the preeminent railroad stations in our region? Will it merely serve as a utilitarian facility, or will it fall into disrepair and disuse? These are the first line of questions to be considered. Decisions will have to be made, some of them very hard and some very costly. It is hoped that this evening's presentation will serve as a catalyst and an example of the possibilities for restoring much of the station's historic character while accommodating modern uses and tenants. Historian Arthur H. Miller, immediate past president of the foundation, will now speak to the history of the station and the considerations made by the foundation during his tenure in recommending and commissioning the historic structures report that Mr. Harbaugh will describe this evening.
Thank you, members of the council and the public. I'm Arthur Miller, 169 Wildwood Road. Lake Forest 1900 built East Train Station stands today as the remarkable first side of the world-renowned first ever shopping center, Market Square of 1916. Architectural and urban historians, including Robert A.M. Stern, have written about and made pilgrimages to Lake Forest to visit this significant first. They've come to study the evolutionary and contextual mastery of architects Frost and Granger for the station and of resident designer Howard Van Doren Shaw for the other later three sides of Market Square. If Lake Forest ever has a World Heritage Site, this will be it. Protecting and preserving the station has been a Preservation Foundation priority for over a quarter of a century. The present 1900-built train station on McKinley Road and Western Avenue is the fourth on this location, following first a temporary one, later incorporated into a local home, the second depot dating from around 1860, and the third 1880 station moved in 1900 and used first as a church building and later a police garage on Forest Avenue. We know that this is the fourth station from research growing out of the Historic Structure Report by Harbaugh Architects. The firm's work was aided also by local railroad history scholars, David Mattoon of the foundation over here, and Mr. Joe Pearson of Deerfield, also with us today. Mattoon located also the historic interior photo showing a beautiful fireplace in the north ladies' waiting area, as well as other historic features. Pearson located for us the original and follow-up architectural plans. The present station, built to designs by C&NW Railway architects Frost and Granger in 1900, was said by Ira Bach in his book on Chicago stations to be apparently the largest suburban station to that time. Its scale and Tudor half-timbered style helped set the precedent for the later redevelopment of Lake Forest Historic Business District with Frost and Granger's 1899 City Hall, where we are right now, and then south and west a few blocks. This was the template for architect Howard Shaw's 1916 Market Square development for the Lake Forest Improvement Trust. Architects Charles S. Frost and Alfred Hoyt Granger were sons-in-law of the president and main builder of the Chicago and Northwestern Railway System in the late 19th century. Their president was Marvin Hewitt. All of these people lived on the shared estate property on the northeast corner of Sheridan and Westminster. The two architects' self-designed homes still standing there. Hewitt, as a lad, at the outset of the Civil War, had managed the IC trains through Cairo, Illinois, in southern Illinois, south, to deliver troops and goods to General Grant in Kentucky and further south to defeat and divide Confederate forces in 1862 and 1863. By the 1880s and 1890s, he was using this strategic sense to build the CNNW system into a Western and mid-continental powerhouse for extending Chicago's power and reach to the Pacific. His trusted sons-in-law built his stations, scores of them large and small, and became the experts also called on by the other lines too far the best in were also the best in functionality and style. Lake Forest Station opened in the same year the New Onwentsia Club's horse shows began. By 1916, these were bringing over 15,000 people to town for a day in the country. The station was built for an economically and socially elite segment of Chicago's leadership, who congregated here especially in the months of June and July. The station's historic and architectural significance derives from these associations. On the National Register of Historic Places, it is of wide significance, as I said above, as the first 1900 built site of Market Square. This planned development was the first shopping center, the first town center planned around motor vehicles, and the first city beautiful town center to be commercially driven versus government underwritten. Later, it was the first right or the first real estate investment trust. All this significance was anchored by this handsome Tudor-styled and village-scaled 1900 train station. It is a heritage of the first order. Today, earlier preservation efforts have proven to be transitory, and again the station is in serious need of refurbishment, this time to the highest long-term standards. To this end, the Foundation's board engaged at its own expense Chicago's noted preservation architect of this generation, Gunny Harbaugh, a graduate of Brown and of Harvard School of Design. Gunny has led efforts to preserve Chicago's Rookery, the Louis Sullivan former Carson's Building, the Burnham Hotel, and other high-profile projects. His parents met in the station, or at least used it in their courting days. So he has a special personal interest and has committed himself to this work beyond what we could reasonably expect. We are delighted with the historic structure report it has provided. I know that you will find his presentation of great interest. Thank you very much. Gunny?
Thank you, Art, and thank you, council members, for having me here tonight. I'm not going to go through the whole report. I'm not going to give you a lecture. I really want to share with you a little bit of the history of it, give you some images really to show the things that Art was talking about, but then specifically talk about some of the issues that we're facing there with the building so you get a sense of the need. And just a correction, I didn't go to Harvard, actually. Thank you for, I went to MIT up the street. So. As was mentioned, the station, which was one in a series of stations for the Chicago Northwestern system, was very prominent, very large, and this had a lot to do with the fact probably that Hewitt was a resident of Lake Forest, as were the architects. That's probably a whole story in and of itself, which I think would be quite interesting to know more about, but the reality was that they had a very successful partnership for about 15 years and designed something like 200 stations all over Illinois. And here's an image of the street soon after the building was complete, and that gives you a good sense. There's the horses there waiting to take the luggage to someone's house. Another image on the left of the station in 1909, I believe, and then how it looks today. And it's basically the same massing and so on that you get. Of course, the foreshortening of the sheds has changed a little bit in the way you perceive the building or the overall site, but more or less it's got its integrity there. And from the east side, it's very much like it's always been. There have been a few changes, but you can get a good sense of more or less this massing of the two gabled ends and the connection in between the two big gable ends representing the waiting areas, the primary waiting areas, and then the luggage holding area to the south of the building. I hope you can see these all right. and was mentioned, this really was the east end of Market Square. It's very important both just physically, but also for view shed. You see in the image on the right, looking out of Market Square down towards the station, sort of giving the terminus to the view down that way. And of course, it's the first thing, Market Square is the first thing that you see as you come off the train and move west. These are images of Frost and Granger. Frost is on the left and Granger on the right. Frost had a pretty well-established firm. Granger joined him in 1898, and they had a very, very prolific and successful partnership brought on by this relationship through marrying sisters. And these are their houses that are still standing, and as was mentioned, as part of sort of an estate complex that was created. Frost's house on the left and Granger's on the right. And Granger's house is clearly this Tudor design, Tudor-esque idea. Frost is a little more sort of Georgian, I guess you could say. But clearly this was a preferred style and something that is not only was used a lot at that time all over by them, but then became sort of the lead, if you will, for how things developed in the town of Lake Forest, as you very well know. This is again a view from the east. So what I wanted to focus more on really are the state of affairs there now. The first thing that really wants to be addressed and is the most vital that it be addressed sooner rather than later is the roof. As you may know, the original roof was a slate roof. We can tell that from the images, also from the descriptions. Here's a good picture of what it looked like from the east side soon after it was completed. And you get this very smooth, planar aspect that the slate would create. The view again from the same direction, well, overall looks more or less the same, but there is quite a difference in the aesthetic aspects to a slate roof versus a shingle roof, as well as its durability question. I mean, a well-made slate roof should last at least 50 years and probably more like 75 and up. I'm not knowing what the condition of it was when they started to work on this in the 80s, but it had survived it till then pretty much. There had been a asphalt shingle roof put on. I'm not sure what year that was, probably in the late 60s, I think. I'm not sure there's a good record of that, but we know that prior to this roof, there was an asphalt shingle roof that probably lasted 10, 15 years. So we can assume that they got 60 to 70 years out of that original roof. And from a distance, it looks okay, more or less okay, when you're driving by or walking by. And as you get a little closer, you begin to see that there's some problems. I don't know, you can't see it very well, but when you're out there, you begin to see that there's some of the shingles have begun to fall off at the ridge. There's actually some holes where shingles have slipped out. And when you get up on top of it, you really see how bad it is. It's basically worn out. The shingles have cupped, split. They have lived their full life now and really need to be replaced. And here you have some other more significant problems where you have complete loss of the shingles themselves, and water is able to then penetrate in between the remaining ones. So it's easy to say the roof needs to be repaired. We'd like to do it in slate. That has certain cost implications and so on. And even if that was not a big enough hurdle, then there's a couple of questions that we have to answer before we really get into the roofing project. And that is, do we just re-roof it as it is, or do we want to have a restorative treatment of the station? And the reason why that's important is that, as you see really clearly in this image, one of the prominent features of the original building were these little dormers, and there were two on the west side as well. And here you see they're missing. It was an important part of the original design. They didn't have that much function. They did bring light into the attic space. They may have offered some borrowed light to a ley light that was in the ticket area, but we don't know exactly how that all functioned. But nonetheless, just from the aesthetic standpoint, that they did have an important aspect to the overall composition of the building. And the other part to note is that when they put the new roof on, they extended this little part of the roof down beyond past where the bank window was. That's this piece here. And to restore it, that probably should come off and restore the masonry here where it has been altered in order to accept that. So that would be one decision that should get made about whether you go back to that or you just leave it. Now, when we discuss the treatments for the building, we always keep in mind what's known as the Secretary of the Interior's treatment for the Secretary of Interior standards for the treatments of historic properties. And those are important because if you were to get some grants, hopefully you would be able to do that eventually. I know you've tried a couple times, but if at first you don't succeed, I'm sure you're trying again. Anyway, if you got the money from the state or the feds, you would be needing to comply with those standards. And the standards do say that a missing element does not need to be replaced. However, if you do go to replace it, you need to do it in an authentic manner. So that's something to keep in mind as we discuss, where this would want to go. Another main issue, a design issue of consideration, would be the warming house, as it's known, on the west side. You see in this original image, not only were these extended out, but it was a very low horizontal building. There was a little jump here where the building itself sat, and these sheds sort of engaged it. And that little jump is there. It's in a different configuration. But this was added, again, probably as part of the 80s renovation. And the other thing that happened is they truncated these ends when they foreshortened the sheds themselves. So the question would be, do you leave this or do you take it off? And then, as I mentioned, the ends of the sheds originally had a little hip on it, like you see here. Again, sort of a low profile, and gave a finish to it in a different manner than sort of just slicing it off with this gable end, which, not knowing what their thinking was, may have been that they were looking for a signage opportunity or some other reason, or maybe they were just being honest with the fact that these things were in fact cut off like a loaf of bread in a way. So would we put those back the way they were? I guess we would advocate that would be more true to the original design intent. Okay, so now we've asked questions about some of the forms and shapes of the roof, and then there's another sort of pragmatic question about this mechanical equipment that's up on the roof. Do we make allocation to just put the stuff back on the roof? Some of it is serviceable, some of it is past its serviceable life. I'm not going to go into the MEP at this time. I'm going to wait to the end and sort of bring that up again, but it is a question. If you want to change the mechanical system, this issue goes away. If you want to leave these things here, then they have to be accommodated. It's just another thing that needs to be thought about in the course of dealing with the roof. So that pretty much sums the issues with the roof. There are also, supporting the roof, there is these wooden elements, some of which you see here, and due to lack of maintenance, perhaps these weren't really addressed when the 80s restoration was done, or only partially addressed. But you can see clearly that the deterioration has continued on, and these are failing here in a pretty extreme way, and those definitely need to be addressed. These are the worst ones. There are also some on the other side, and actually all the way around the building there are places where wood trim and elements that are tied into the roof itself that would definitely need to be restored at this time in order to put the integrity of the roof back together again. There are other wood elements that have weathered severely, in some cases to the point where they would need to be replaced. In other cases like this, I think they are restorable without replacement. There probably needs to be a little bit more investigation and some maybe some invasive openings done and things like that to really determine how far gone some of this stuff is. But basically the approach would be to try to retain as much of the original historic wood fabric as possible, take the paint off, treat the wood in some manner to give it more vitality, and then to recoat it with new paints. The windows are in varying states. They're not in horrible condition, certainly have dealt with worse. However, they are in need of repair and some restoration. You can see that there is some thermal glazing that was added, and that would be something to talk about whether or not we would want to do that now. Depends on, again, the approach to the inside of the station, how much we want to think about the tempering of that environment that's in there, and whether or not the thermal glazing makes sense. Painting, I think it goes without saying, and it's pretty obvious that the whole thing needs to be painted. We did some preliminary paint analysis. That's part of the report. Basically, the color palette that's out there is pretty close to what it seems to have always been. There are some changes, the window sash and so on, and we would want to do a little more investigation to verify some things so we got the color scheme right. But it's pretty much like people are used to, so there wouldn't be a jarring change on the outside of the building, like some projects that I've worked on where you have a real sales job to get people to be convinced that it shouldn't be white. I don't know if you're familiar with the Widow Clark House downtown, but it's the oldest house in the city of Chicago, built in 1835. And it's been painted white for about 40 years or 30 years. And our investigation determined that, in fact, it was a stone color. It wasn't white when it was restored, or when it was built in its 1850s manifestation. So we had a little bit of a convincing job to deal with the colonial dames that, in fact, their white building was supposed to be sort of an off-white stone color, but everybody seemed to be happy with the results. So. Some of the other features, this element here is a replacement. We could talk about whether that really needs to be replaced or just needs to be repainted. Those are some of the finer questions about the restoration. But you can see even places that are protected under the eaves are in bad need of paint. In fact, we don't know the last time. Maybe someone here could tell me when the last time the building was painted, but probably at least 15 years ago. There are some masonry issues, not a lot of masonry issues, but there are some things that give us a little concern that would need to be addressed, such as some of this is a little rust jacking going on at this point here. There is some movement. This is, again, in the warming house. You can see that this has moved out about a half an inch here, and this has been going on for a long time because the movement has been then just filled in with mortar. So that should be looked at a little closer, and a determination made whether there needs to be some excavation done there or not. I mean, the building isn't falling down, but that displacement is something that's a little bit of a concern. And the same thing with the ticketing office window. There's some displacement here where there's a step cracking, and there's some movement in this piece here. This stone here has actually got some cracks in it, and again, evidence that there's something going on there. There's been some replacement of brick here. I don't know that we necessarily say we'd have to redo that, but it would be a thing to consider since it doesn't match all that well. The biggest change would be the repointing. The pointing job that was done was not the greatest. It's pretty much near the end of its service life right now. And we do know quite clearly that the original intent, I don't know how, again, it's a little light in here, but if you look around the windows here and on the corner here and up here, there's a different treatment for the mortar itself. There was a white mortar at those points to sort of jump the feature around those elements, the window elements and the corners. It was to make those jump out. Sort of a reverse version of what this building is. This building has brick on the corners and then white stucco in between. This had a differentiation with the white mortar and then the darker mortar, and you can see some remnants of that are still there, and that could be sampled in a exact match made to replicate that. Okay, so that pretty much covers the outside, the major deals on the outside. We're not getting into issues of the parking or the landscaping and things like that. Those are issues that ought to be discussed, but I'm really focused more specifically on the building itself, since that's where the issues that have to be addressed are. And then as you move inside, that begins to ask another bunch of questions about what do we do on the inside, how do we want to treat it. As you can see, and you probably remember, this was the bank side, and this wall here was added, as well as in the main waiting room, or the men's waiting room. I have some better images. This is the ladies' waiting room, as it's known, on the north side. This wall was added, and on the other side, a similar treatment was done. I believe this picture is that room, that same view you just had during the renovation. There are a few pictures like this. It would be great to get some more. If there's anybody out there in town who has in a shoebox in their attic somewhere some pictures of what this thing looked like before, it would be great to get those. We did a pretty significant search, but I'm always convinced that there's another stone to look under to find something that we're looking for. And then again, these are pictures of the main waiting room, or the men's waiting room, and this is where the barber shop is. This is a wall that was done quite well. It's very in keeping with the room. It could stay if you wanted it to, if there was a need to have this division in there, if you want to retain the retail in there, which is fine. I mean, those are all questions that sort of need to be thought through and discussed, I think, to decide how you really want to treat it. All I wanted to share with this is that it does need some updating, it does need some improvements. And if you wanted to, I think that there would be the possibility of being more true to its original configuration, and to basically restore these spaces in a way that either wasn't possible or wasn't understood well enough back in the 80s. There's a couple of elements in this very interesting historic photograph that you can see, and this was noted by Art. There was a fireplace in the ladies' waiting room here. Also note this is the horizontal wainscot paneling that was present in the men's waiting room. And I'll show you a couple of images of how we know exactly what that was. There were these these were wood treated and so on, and there was definitely color on the walls, not white walls. Here you see the way this is today, and it's not all that different. This is fairly intact. Exactly what's 100% original and what's been changed, I can't tell you, but we could probably figure it out with a little more digging. One of the things that we do know, and we also see is in need of being addressed, the existing floor has pretty much run its course, and as you can see that it's quite worn, both through foot traffic, probably through salts that have been brought in, have added to the erosion of the glaze that's on there and so on. And again, this photograph, I don't know how well you can see it, but this is a photograph that was taken prior to the renovation, and if you look closely you can make out the pattern of the tiling. There's a whole section in the HSR that goes into this flooring issue, so I'm not going to bore you with that, other than to say we do feel very confident that we know what it was, and that we could actually get tile that was very close to what it was originally. So that if there was a desire to go back to that original flooring, we think we could do that quite readily. Also on the inside, this is where you see the need for the roofing treatment, unless this is an equipment problem, which I don't believe it is. The roof is leaking, causing damage to the original plaster ceilings in there. And we do think that most of the ceilings are intact, although they probably had some renovation. The walls have been drywalled over. In the course of the research, it was quite interesting to see that very close at hand we had another Frost & Granger design station, this one, the Lake Bluff station, done 2 years later, which is a little bit smaller than yours, but it had a lot of similar elements to yours, including the way that the interior was treated. And here again is this horizontal wood paneling that I mentioned, and this could certainly serve well as a precedent to match if the desire was to restore the Lake Forest station. You can see it has a similar feeling. It is smaller, more compact, but it has these beam elements, which you see right in this room here, again, that they seem to enjoy using in a lot of their architecture. Another station, also by Frost and Granger, that has some clues for us is the Racine station. It's quite handsome. It's got a nice scale to it, and in fact has been recently restored. And I show these images because we believe that this is very much like what the inside of Lake Forest Station was like with this orange painted plaster. In fact, one of the historic documents, or I guess you can't see it that well. Maybe you can make it out. There is sort of a little decorative element where it changes from a dark orange to a light orange, and there's the little Tudor arch, if you will, in here, and then this area up here is that lighter color. That, in fact, is drawn on the historic drawing. And some sampling of the building itself did, in fact, reveal that there is this orange color existing in the Lake Forest Station. So this gives you a very good sense of what that waiting room was like and what it could be like again. Again, it's a little bit bigger than yours. It's one big room, but it has a really handsome presence, and I encourage you to go up and take a look if you haven't been up there to see it. So this is just to juxtapose the difference. It would be quite a change. I think it would be very exciting and dramatic. People would have to get a little bit used to it, but I think it could be quite handsome to go back to that. But again, this is not something that's required to be done. It would just be something to think about if it was desirable to really go the full mile and restore the building. There are other issues that ought to be addressed, and this is again where we get involved in making the decisions about make the change, and then once you make the change, how far do you take it? So the restorative change would sort of be a result of decisions about the interiors that ought to be dealt with. And without going into all the specifics, there's more detail again in the report. The main ones are the toilet rooms. There's just a single men's and a single woman's toilet room. There's some vandalism issues that occur in there. And I think that could be reconfigured in a way that would work better and also be made accessible. While the station is technically accessible, the toilet rooms are not, and it would be nice to be able to make them more functionally appropriate for today. And I think that's probably the biggest issue. We would also look at how we would deal with accessibility on the east side of the building. There are a couple of steps that maybe that we'd want to leave that, but find another way in that would be easier for people in wheelchairs and so on to get in, or with walkers and canes. The other big issue is, again, the MEP issue. And in this green world we're now living in, that issue of sustainability is something to really keep in mind. It may also be an opportunity for some grants. We found that with other projects that we have, that there have been, although they seem to be spotty at the moment. I think they will be coming back in some ways to get some funding for green technologies. And by that I mean, and this again has gone into and fairly in-depth in the report, that this station actually lends itself quite well to the idea of a geothermal system, where you would make the capital investment to dig the wells and so on. But once you've done that, your energy costs are extremely low, and it has it needs to look. You need to look long out on the return on the initial capital investment. But the good news is, for long-term holder of a property, it makes a lot of sense, and it's certainly a very green idea. It's something that uses very little energy to maintain and to run. So that's really it. I don't want to, again, take up too much of your valuable time. I want to leave time for some questions. And I think with that, I'll open it up to you all, unless you have
Thank you,
some
Gunny,
comments.
and Gail and Art, thank you very much. This is really a wonderful report, and I'd like to open it up to the council members for questions. Anyone?
Just a curiosity, when do you think the chimneys were changed? Your first picture, they're rather ornate. In the later picture, they're plain. So I'm just curious, I know the one was removed. I remember when I was young, sitting in the station with the fireplace going in the winter, it was the nice.
You do remember that?
Oh, yeah,
You have any
early
pictures?
60s.
He's our
Do you have
oldest
any pictures
councilman.
of sitting by the fire?
Senior member, yeah, he's the senior.
No,
Older
see-
than
no, but you
dirt.
see, no, but you see, that's fantastic. But I gotta believe that people have some snapshots of somebody sitting by the fire.
I would think they would. I mean, that was removed when at that time, the First National Bank of Lake Forest took over that side, and they took out the fireplace and took down the chimney on that side as well.
Right.
And covered over the 2 windows.
Right. We, there are a couple other pictures. I didn't put everything in here, but there is a picture of the I'm sorry, I'm going in the wrong direction. This view, there is another picture in your book that shows what it looked like between these 2 phases, where you see that the vanilla box, if you will, on the inside of the bank space was done when that stuff was removed. So I don't know, we don't know the data when that was taken out, but it would be, we don't have the chimney as a priority item because it's gone and it would be expensive. It would be wonderful to put it back if, again, a restorative treatment is taken, because it really completes the symmetry of the building and gave that balance. The one on the south side was the functional one for the boiler and so on, and this one on this side was servicing the fireplace.
Right, but if the original picture that you have when you start the presentation really shows those architectural chimneys.
Right.
And they weren't just
They're
straight
very
up.
prominent.
They
and
were,
You can see them there. This is the one on the
yeah,
north
they
side
were very
that's
nice
missing.
with the
It
tops
has a
on
s-
them and
and it has a stone
right, the cap
element
was,
where it changed. Yep.
yeah, really very nice.
Well, if you'd like, we'd be happy to put those back. For you.
That could be the Luby.
We
The Luby fireplace.
I just
Sell
have a
that
general
anymore.
question.
Yeah.
It obviously looks like the roofing issues are the number one issue that I think I got out of your report. If we didn't have all the money, but we had some, we could do the roof. Is it your opinion that the slate roof, that structure could hold that, and even though some things couldn't be fixed, let's say, if we just did the slate roof, would that?
Well, I have to say, we have not done the structural investigation to say that, although my gut is yes, but we'd certainly want to verify that. I don't think there's any indication of structural challenges or problems relative to the slate roof being the reason that they took it down. So I don't think that should be an issue, but it should be verified for sure.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and just, again, the project itself, I'm at the station every day, and it needs repair, and it's apparent. And it's kind of maddening that we can't get state contributions or contributions from Metro to do this. But with the roof, and it is a dramatic effect, it looks 100 times better with the slate. And this is estimating, what is the difference in weight between having the shingle as compared to the slate? Is it 2 times the weight?
The weight?
Yeah.
That's a good question. I don't want to guess, but it's more than twice, I'm sure.
Okay. And just
I mean, the
curious.
wood shingle weighs almost nothing, and the slate is significant now. But this was designed to take the slate, so and the roof framing, to my knowledge, has not been altered, so I don't think there's really an issue about that.
Yes.
And if there was, after doing some, I mean, when we did this report, we did not really do any structural investigation other than to point out where we thought there were issues. There are those few masonry issues. Those ought to be investigated a little more in depth and make sure that, again, it's not falling down, but there are some things that ought to be addressed. And that would certainly be part of the roof project. If that is to go forward, that would definitely do that.
Yeah, and there's some urgency to it. As I get my hair cut in the barber shop there, you can see the ceiling is, starting to be dangerous.
Well, when there's shingles missing, water gets in. It just finds a way in, so.
Was there any serious look at restoring the tunnel? Yeah, I noticed
Yep. In
some
the
of
report, we
process.
talk about, ideally, it would be really nice to put the stair back in and to reconnect it across, or find a way to use the tunnel for something, mechanical backup or something like that. But you could restore the tunnel, we believe.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I had a couple of questions. Do you expect to run into lead paint in this situation?
Well, we didn't test for lead, but as I think everyone here knows, that before 1976, I believe, lead was pretty much used in paint. And I can say that every project we work on in an older building, even the ones that are only 50 years old, which we do quite a bit of, have lead paint, and that can be addressed and is addressed on a daily basis in the construction process, so.
Oh, I don't disagree with that. It's, I was more thinking about the cost implications because, you know, having your painters wandering around in hazmat suits does tend to.
Right,
Please.
I don't think that is going to be a significant issue.
Excellent. The modern slate is much thinner than the original slate and gives therefore a different look. Would you be inclined to go to the thicker slate or go with the, you know, more
I would
current slate?
prefer to try to be as close to, if we can get a little closer to figuring out what exactly it was, I would go as close as we could get, understanding the weight issue and so on, but
No, I agree.
I think we would want to try to do it. There's another image, I don't know whether I even had it in the show, but you really see how the roof was very flat and planar, and that's the feeling that we would want to try to recapture.
If you do go to slate, I'd highly recommend you use ice and snow shield all the way to the ridge line, because in effect it gives you virtually a membrane roof underneath your slate. If you're going to go to slate, I would urge that the HVAC not be put on top of the roof. Repair people have an inclination to want to walk on the slate as soon as they can find some, and the damage to it is, you know, significant. Just two other points. I would, depending on the viability of it, I'd encourage keeping the worn tile, you know, where the glaze is worn, because it gives it a feeling of age instead of being a sort of a new old building. You know, I think it has a feel and an ambiance that might be beneficial. And then just as an overall comment as to the project, a lot of towns across the country are searching for an identity. You see people recreating with almost desperation an ambience to surround their business community in. And I think in this case we have that. We have a market square that to a large degree sells to people that appreciate historic relevancy. And so therefore I think it would be very beneficial to the community, both the sales community as well as the community in general, to make this a very high priority, because we have our own historic monuments that give the ambience to the community, and I would urge that those be considered as not just historic to be historic, but also to the viability of the shopping center. Thank you.
Excellent. Any other questions? Bob, I note we have $150,000 allocated in this CIP. Can you talk about how we're going to go about finding either matching funds or private or public, or how we're thinking about it right now, or what maybe the next step might be for council here as we look at this very important building and how we might deal with it?
Well, I think there's going to be a couple of things for the council over the course of the next 6 to 12 months. First and foremost, I think as the council knows, in December of 2010, our lease does expire. And we are in the midst of trying to renegotiate that lease. It's a little more difficult and problematic in that they want to tend to have more of a short-term lease than a long-term lease. And even though we've expressed to them it's going to be difficult to get the community and or others to invest in a major renovation of this building and only get a 5-year lease, that hopefully we will be able to make some progress on that. And I think that there seemed to be some wiggle room there, that they were prepared to move, but it'll take some force, maybe, is the best word. We will continue to pursue any grant funding. We'll probably again reapply for the ITEP grant. We had some conversations with Metra and Union Pacific officials as to whether it might be more advantageous for us to let them apply for the dollars. Unfortunately, I think their comeback was, no, you're probably more likely to get it than we are, because we get funding for other state projects. The problem that we have is that even though we look at this and we say that this can be significantly enhanced over what it is right now, on a grading scale, this is not bad for Metra. And so this doesn't yet make their cut. Having said that, we have submitted the list based on the historic structures report and some work that staff has done, and asked them to prioritize what they would be willing to pay for. And they would agree with Mr. Harbo that the roof structure is first and foremost the top priority. Having said that, their approach would be, we'll put asphalt shingles on it and be done with it, because that's what most of our other stations have. So there will obviously have to be some negotiations there, that they may contribute a certain amount of money towards the roof repair, and then if we want to take it to a different level, that we would have to do that. So I think these will start to come to fruition probably in the summer, and we'll have to make some decisions. We do have the money that's in their budget right now was planned for painting on the outside of the facility. But I think if we are able to get some other grant monies or monies from Union Pacific or Metro to do the roof, we may have to redirect those more immediately to do the roof first, and then look at coming back and doing the painting. We had a meeting, what was it, a month ago, I think it was, with members of the foundation, and talked about how we might be able to stage this renovation over a period of a few years. And maybe we raise some money and then we do this, and we raise some money, we do that. Always be looking to name a room if someone wants to step forward and to donate a lot of money. The Ren Golter room certainly has a ring to it, I think, on that the
Only
north side.
empty room in the building?
Well, he seemed to want to direct how the renovations occurred, so I think that it's
That's right.
only fitting that he pay for them.
That's right. If he pays for it, then he can direct it, right? That's the way it works. The other issue that is out there is, as the council knows, we've lost a few tenants over the past year. Some of that has been due to just their own internal business decisions. Others has been that, you know, they want some improvements made to the building. And so it's hard to get the tenants until we know, A, that we have a long-term lease, and B, that there are going to be some interior renovations, because, as Mr. Harbo said, the washrooms do need some work. There aren't washrooms in each of the spaces, and so they're using the public washrooms for their employees and so forth. So it's very difficult to try and rent that space with some of the limitations that exist there today.
Okay, well, great. I can't thank the Preservation Foundation enough for taking leadership on this. I mean, we have obviously not had the funds to do this great work, and it truly was eye-opening for me, and really recognizing the importance of the station and what it means to our downtown, and how critical it is. I think we need to keep our thinking caps on here and figure out how we're going to address it, because it is truly a gem of our city, and critically important, as Ren and others have identified, to anchoring our downtown. So, and Gunny, very nice to meet your acquaintance, and wonderful to read your report. I think we should all take a ride up to Racine and see what we could maybe have there. So thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is an opportunity for public comment. Any public comment this evening? Any other comments by council members? If not, we will, I'll take a motion to adjourn the committee of the whole.
So moved?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Committee of the whole is adjourned, and city council will begin in 5 minutes.